Good afternoon, everyone. Michael Chase of the Unheralded SportsView.com, bringing you the first installment of a new audio show debuting on the site, a show properly named The Runaround. The basis of this show will be covered a variety of sports topics, from game recaps, weekly developments, among other stories and inquiries. No sport is off limits to be talked about, and fan and reader involvement will be key in driving discussion as this content advances forward. The Wizards, Capitals, and NFL are all on tap to be discussed today, so to delay no longer, let's get this session going. Now, the first topic of the day has to deal with the state of the direction of the Washington Wizards. Their current record currently sits at 12-18, coming off their most recent win last night, 112-110 over the Denver Nuggets. That also puts them officially with that victory this past evening at 6-1 over their last 7 games and 7-4 overall their last 11. So you can definitely tell that maybe things are starting to get figured out in the nation's capital. And when I look at this Wizards team, where they really started to trend in the right direction for me has to be when they made those significant lineup changes. And I'm talking about the insertion of both Mo Wagner and Garrison Matthews into the starting lineup. Now, for some of you, you may be asking still, who is Mo Wagner and who is Garrison Matthews? Well, Garrison Matthews, to start with him, is a perimeter player. He's a good three-point shooter, not a great one necessarily, but gives them high energy and effort on the defensive end as well as when it comes to getting 50-50 balls. And Mo Wagner, I would definitely say, is kind of the 7-foot version of that, where he's going to go out there, while he does maybe have a little more skill overall than Garrison Matthews had. The main thing he does is provide energy, and that's why with those two guys, the main thing that they've added to this Washington team, especially the starting lineup, is that early energy and effort that they need to start games on time. Because if you watched any Wizards game this year, you know the main thing they've had to struggle with is they just don't seem to start games on time, fall behind by 20 plus early, and spend basically the next 3.5 quarters trying to dig themselves out of what seemingly is an inevitable hole. So really, I think those two main guys, while the numbers are going to show a slight improvement, I think overall it's just the energy and effort of the team has risen. Now, I don't want to give those guys all the credit because the rest of the guys on the team certainly had to take to it, but I think they've kind of set the tone for this team really starting to understand that, hey, we got to go out there and fight on the defensive end every night and at least put in the effort. Otherwise, one, you're not going to be able to stop anybody, and two, you're not going to give yourself a very good chance to win many basketball games. Now, that also kind of leads into the fact that since they have gone in there, the numbers technically do say that they actually have improved defensively. Now, to be honest and transparent, in terms of opponents' points per game, they still rank at 119.5 points per game allowed. That's still 29th in the league, which is basically second to last in the association. So they're still the second worst defensive team in terms of points allowed in the NBA. Their defensive rating is slightly better, but not that much. They're 27th in the league in that category at 114.9 in terms of overall defensive rating. But in taking a look at their last 11 games, they're allowing only 116.7 points per game, which means, especially since Mo Wagner and Garrison Matthews were inserted as primary starters, right around the Boston Celtics game on one Sunday afternoon, when they allowed their fewest points allowed this season, which was 91. Basically, they're allowing 3 fewer points per game since those lineup changes were made. Now, again, I can't just say it's because those two guys were inserted, but definitely you can see that things have certainly improved defensively, but certainly not everything is fixed at the same time. I think the main things when you watch the Wizards right now is that their late game defense is definitely better. When it comes to trying to get stops down the stretch, they seem to have figured out that part of the game a lot more, which is why they've been able to hang on for a lot of these close wins, because as we've also found out, the Wizards don't necessarily like blowing out or are capable of blowing teams out at the current moment. But I think still overall throughout the game, you can still see a little pockets of play where the Wizards defense is still highly suspect and highly shaky. They don't defend screen and rolls particularly well. They still don't rebound the ball well enough to make me feel comfortable about them going at a team, say if they make the playoffs in a 7-game series. So overall, I still think there's a lot left to be desired about this team defensively, but I think they're certainly now putting in the effort, which was my main frustration with them early in the season. It didn't even seem like the effort was there to try to guard anybody, but now it seems like they're really taking pride in trying to stop their man. While everything's not necessarily perfect, you can see the steady progression in terms of things improving, and a lot of credit goes to the players as well as Scott Brooks, the head coach. Now, the next main topic I really want to get into with the Wizards has to deal with the development of their 2 young wing players that are going to be highly key in the future and the ceiling ultimately of this ball club, and that is Deni Avdija and Rui Hachimura. And I really want to talk about the development process that those two have gone through as the season has gone along, with the Wizards kind of in limbo when it comes to figuring out what type of team they are. Are they truly a team aspiring to be in the playoff, or are they still at the stage where they're trying to rebuild while also still be competitive at the same time? I think it's the latter, but that's up for you to decide at the end of the day, because I'm not necessarily in the minds of the front office. But when I look at the numbers, especially to begin with Rui Hachimura, the main thing I kind of see right now is that nothing has necessarily changed. I mean, really, the only main thing that has changed, he's actually taking one fewer shot per game this year than last year. Now, some of that you could say is that you have a guy, Russell Westbrook, who is one of those point guards that's a high volume shooter, so that's going to take away from shots for Rui Hachimura. But at the end of the day, my main gripe with him is that it is a little disappointed that all his statistics across the board show he's relatively the same player, averaging right around 13 points once again, around the same amount of rebounds, which is around 5 or 6, which I don't think for a guy of his length and athleticism is nearly enough for the impact he can have on the boards to really help this team improve as a rebounding unit. And really the biggest thing I can give to him on the other end of the spectrum as a positive is that he has certainly shown some slight improvements as a defender. Now, is he going to go out there and lock people down like Kawhi Leonard, LeBron James, players like that? No, we saw recently that Kawhi certainly went out there and gave him a rough time, as did LeBron for several stretches. But look, it's all part of the learning process for the young man. That's going to happen. But definitely I want to see him take that next step now, where now he can truly become the third scorer that if the Wizards are going to go anywhere, not just this season, but down the road, they need him to be that guy down the stretch. Because it can't always be Bradley Beal. It can't always be Russell Westbrook. You need a third guy, whether that's him, Davis Bertans, whether Deni Avdija, who I'm going to get to in a second, turns into that. But I think Rui has all the gifts to do that. It's just about the mindset I think he has to change about himself. Not always being the guy that's so passive, but being the guy that wants to go out there and get his own shot because he's shown the ability to create his own shot. Now, on the other end, you have rookie Deni Avdija, who at this moment is currently averaging about 5 field goal attempts per game. Again, just like with Rui, I just don't think that's enough. Now, it's been a bit of a tough season for Avdija because he was one of the players that dealt with the COVID situation, has kind of had a disjointed start to his young NBA career, but he's shown plenty of flashes that would really make you excited about his prospects. Some of the things that I kind of look at is that he's really shown the potential, I think, to be a really good defender. Even though he's kind of dealt with a lot of foul trouble, especially in recent games coming off the bench, which is interesting because he didn't get into nearly as much foul trouble when he was as a starter. Overall, I think he shows a lot of potential as a defender because he moves his feet well, he's got active hands, and again, he's a guy that I think all season I've never had to necessarily question his effort on the defensive end. I think he's just got to learn the nuances and continue to grow into his body to really become, I think, the really high-quality defender he can be. And then, I think, again, it's just like what I said earlier. He's got the same issue with Rui where I think he just needs to be more aggressive and needs to take more shots. There can't be any more of this up-and-down play as the season goes along. Now, again, he gets a little bit of slack because it is his rookie year. But at the end of the day, he can't have a night where he takes 10 shots and makes 6, and then the next shot he only takes 2. I think he's too talented of a player, and he's shown he's a very solid to, I think, could really turn into an above-average three-point shooter, and actually has turned out to be a better three-point shooter than a lot of scouts thought he was going to be. At the same time, he shows a good handle as well, can take guys off the dribble, and he's showed off some athleticism with a couple of impressive dunks this year too. So, again, another guy that's got all the talent there, and I think he's got some very polished off skills that maybe people don't give him enough credit for that really make him a guy that could be a true offensive threat for this Wizards team. One, I just think they got to find ways to get him the ball more offensively. And then two, when he gets the ball, don't always be willing to pass it up to a guy, especially like Bradley Beal. That's what I always say about a lot of the young players on this team. We can't be ready to just defer to a guy like Bradley Beal. Because Beal, at the end of the day, he's going to need you guys' help to go where he wants to go. And that's on to win a championship, hopefully here in D.C. if he stays there his entire career. So, I mean, that's where I am with those two young guys specifically. They can really turn into those foundational wings that can help give Brad the support that he needs in the scoring department as well as on the boards, as well as also playing very good defense at the end of the day. Now, the last topic I want to talk about really quickly has to deal with center Alex Len. And sort of my things about Alex Len is that, but my main plea to Scott Brooks is that please give me more Alex Len. He was a guy that I really liked when he was at Maryland. Left maybe a little bit earlier than I thought he would, but again, skilled big man, 7 feet. Can stretch out to the three-point line, which I think is beloved in the NBA today, where you can have 5 guys on the floor that at any time can hit a three-point shot. And really, when I look at his numbers, in the limited duty and minutes he's gotten, especially recently, he's only given about 4.5 to 5 minutes a game up until this most recent game against Denver. He's still managing to average about 6.5 points, shoot nearly 64% for the field, and he's also probably the best shot blocker on the squad, averaging 1.2 blocks per game despite being on the back end in terms of games played for the Wizards this year. So not only is he giving you solid offensive production when he does get the basketball, but at the same time, he's giving you some shot blocking that the Wizards really just have not gotten, nor have they had since they had really Marcin Gortat was the last guy to truly average over a block per game for the Wizards as a defensive player. So I think giving Alex Len a lot more minutes could be real beneficial for this team because I think He's a guy that can move his feet well, and I think the combination of him and Mo Wagner could really be some for the Wizards this season, maybe the next couple of years, and they try to figure out their front court situation overall, especially at the center spot. I think he's a nice prospect to have and a guy that's still plenty young enough and really is not even fully in the prime of his career just yet, especially with how young he came into the league in terms of age. So, I mean, again, my only plea to Scott Brooks right now is just personally, please give me more Alex Len. Please, because I think the ceiling for this team, if he gets more playing time and shows all the skills that I definitely know he has and that he's shown us in spurts, I mean, I think this team ceiling can go a lot higher, more than people would ever think. And with that being said, I think now it's time to transition to the next part of our discussion. And it has to deal with topic number 2 of the day, the Washington Capitals. Let's get to it. So I think the best way to kick off topic 2 of the day of this discussion is asking the overall question. Are the Capitals good? Are they mediocre? Or are they somewhere on the in-between range in terms of team right now? When you look at their current record, it's pretty good. They're 10-5-4. But when you really dig deep into it, over their last 11 games, they're basically playing 500 hockey at 5-5-1. And they have 2 losses to Pittsburgh as well as 2 losses to the New York Rangers mixed into that 11-game stretch. While overall they've played those teams 6 times over the last 11 games, and they're 2-3-1 against those 2 teams. So then the question becomes, does that show how poorly the Capitals are played, or are they just not as good of a team as we thought they were going to be going into the season? Well, I looked up a couple of numbers. Currently, they're 18th overall in the NHL in goal differential at a +1, which puts them right now ever so slightly in the back half of the NHL. So they're a little less than mediocre to kind of start answering the question I presented. Well, the main thing I always want to look at with the Caps, though, is their penalty killing going to get better? It's always seemed to be a problem over the years, and they've had stretches where they've looked really good, and they've had stretches where they've looked really bad. And I'm not just talking about this season, I'm talking about really since I've been following the team. And right now, their penalty kill currently sits at 79.6%. Which is slightly above league average when you look at the league average is about 78.9%, which is about where a penalty kill is usually going to stand. And that's actually up from the 78.6 they were at before they had a perfect 4-for-4 night last night against a pretty talented Pittsburgh Penguins power play. So maybe last night is a good stepping stone for them. And then I also like to look at shots per game because, again, when it comes to the Capitals, offense for me is never going to be the problem. It's about their defense. And right now they're allowing just under 31 shots a game at about 30.8, which ranks them 21st. So again, a lot of the numbers say at the moment they're still kind of on that back tier of the NHL in terms of defense. Offensively, they're still able to put the puck in the net, and they haven't had many struggles with that this year. But if they really can't fix a lot of these defensive problems going forward, I just don't see this team having a long shelf life, especially if they do end up making the playoffs, which, as we've seen the last 2 years, their shelf life was not very long, and they're really trying to recapture that magic that won them the Stanley Cup back in 2018. So to kind of move forward then, some of the main things I see other than defense is that really I just kind of call it the same old Cap syndrome, where they're sluggish to start games, and sometimes they have just surprisingly bad efforts against teams you would really think that they would be able to go out there and outplay on any given night. And I'd look at the 2 Rangers games that they lost recently as perfect examples. Again, the Rangers, overall against the rest of the league, have not looked like that great of a hockey team. But it seems like the 2 times the Capitals have played them, they've found a way to pretty spectacularly fall behind by 2 to 3 goals and then not be able to generate enough offense, despite me just talking about how good their offense actually kind of has been so far this year. Against the Rangers, they fall behind, they haven't been able to pick back up, and it's really been the starts that have killed them. Bad turnovers, bad gaps defensively, things of that nature. And some of that really makes me think, are they trying to just work their way to really adjust to the new defensive system that new head coach Peter Laviolette and his staff are bringing in? A defensive system, along with an offensive system that really encourages aggressive defense, but also you got to have good gaps and good defensive coverages overall to make up for the fact that your defensemen are going to be up a lot more in the play than we've seen in the past couple of years. The problem is, though, this team is still giving up far too many odd man rushes, still taking penalties ad nauseum, and there's still a lot of shifts when you look at it from the offensive standpoint where it just seems like they're so pass happy because they're so darn talented that they just don't want to shoot the puck. And sometimes when they don't shoot the puck, they end up making these maddening passes which turn into bad turnovers. Next thing you know, the puck's going the other way. It ends up in their net. on a play that should have never happened if a puck just makes its way on cage. So again, it's a lot of some of the same problem we've kind of seen really the last 5 to 7 years, other than maybe 2018 where they really were able to put it all together. But again, we still got to give them some time because there's still a good chunk of the hockey season left for them to really figure out Laviolette's system. But I think they're kind of trying to find that perfect medium right now where the defenseman can jump up, be aggressive, and be productive offensively while at the same time not doing that and sacrificing on the defensive end, which leads to giving teams like Pittsburgh as well as other opponents that have a lot of speed on the wings and up the middle opportunities to create odd man rushes and really put our goaltenders at risk. And speaking of goaltending, I want to go there next because I think the Capitals might honestly, and it's kind of been talked around with other media sources, that they might actually have a goaltending question when all's said and done. Because when you look at it right now, because Ilya Samsonov, who is supposed to be the projected starter going into this year, dealt with the COVID situation, and is still trying to work his way back into shape to come back to the NHL level, that's obviously opened the door for a guy like Vitek Vanacek, who all the year has been pretty solid. An 8-4-3 record, a 2.88 goals against average, and a 909 save percentage in his 16 games played, 15 started. So overall, I think he's really been pretty solid overall, but I always have sort of this one pet peeve when Vanacek plays that always seems to give me a heart attack when I watch him. And that's just his rebound control. And it sort of goes back to the time when we talked about with other goaltenders with the Caps, where one of their main things was it seemed like rebound control was an issue. Now, again, part of that is just you need to have your defensemen and obviously forwards coming back to support the netminder and clear out the front of the net from bodies, as well as clearing out the puck to get it out of harm's way. But at the same time, some of the placements of his rebounds just really tend to aggravate me at times, just because he's not getting the puck out of a situation and putting himself in a spot where he has to make an even better save after stopping what initially is usually not that difficult of a shot. So I think if he could just really clean up his rebound control as part of his game, I think he's going to be a pretty solid goaltender for us. Do I see him as the answer going forward? No, I'm still at the end of the day hoping Samsonov can come back obviously healthy and free of COVID and become the number one guy I think the Capitals and I myself certainly see in him. But that remains to be seen. Right now, it's Vanacek's net. And then I think the last thing we can really talk about overall with this Capitals team is a few more of my pet peeves when it comes to this Capitals team. Now, again, I'm not trying to just harp on the negative, but these are just things that I've kind of observed over my time, and it's not just this year, but the last couple of years with these specific players that I just want to see get fixed so I don't have to worry about them and I won't have to talk about them ever again. Dmitry Orlov and Nick Jensen, two defensemen who, again, show a lot of offensive skill and make some great plays. In fact, Nick Jensen made a great play last night, is now a +4 of the year, having a pretty darn good season, playing pretty well overall the last couple games especially. But with him, as well as Dmitry Orlov, it's just those head-scratching giveaways and turnovers, as well as the decisions they make in the defensive zone that just boggle my mind, that put the team in just terrible positions. Now, again, with a guy like Dmitry Orlov especially, I've kind of gotten used to it over the year. But with Nick Jensen, he's still a guy that's had to grow on me in terms of his play, because I wouldn't necessarily say I've been a big fan of his, but I'm willing to support him, especially if you're wearing a Caps jersey. But I just need those guys to really clean things up, especially in their own zone, and especially when it comes to puck management. If this team's really going to go where I think they believe they can go, and that's win another Stanley Cup championship. Now, the last two players that they want to talk about both come from the forward ranks, and these are Richard Panik and Jake Verana. Now, Richard Panik, my main thing with him is that we just need more depth scoring from him. He started to play a lot better lately. In fact, had a goal recently as well, I think 2 games ago. But my main thing with him is just that it seems like he comes and goes with his impact on the game. For a guy of his side that I think has some offensive skill to his game, it's just we don't see enough from him. Now, again, some of that may be because he's not necessarily playing on the top line with top-level players, but I think he's still plenty good enough. And again, it's just, for him, it just comes down to, it seems like he just has a lot of these weird puck handling issues when he's out there on the ice. You know, struggling to catch passes, fumbling them away, and when he tries to make moves around certain defensemen, they're really slow and methodical. Now, I'm not saying he's got to have the hands of Connor McDavid, because only Connor McDavid has the type of hands that he has. But I mean, just being a little more smoother when it comes to handling the puck, because I think that's going to help him really create a lot more offensive opportunities for himself, as well as the line and the line mates that he ultimately plays with. For Jake Verana, it's a whole different issue. This guy, I think, is really going to be the future of the Washington Capitals, or at least I hope that's the way they see it. But man, he has just got to figure this thing out in terms of consistency at the NHL level. I mean, he's got 5 goals, 11 points. He's a +4. I mean, he's been all right. But at the end of the day, it's just these long stretches he goes without scoring, and then still doesn't find a way to make an impact in other ways. That's the next part he's really got to figure out at the NHL level. And with this contract situation his coming up this upcoming off season, I mean, at the end of the day, it's up to Jake Verana to really figure out how can he make an impact, not just as a goal scorer, but as an overall player that I think really show his value to this Capitals team. we're going to have to wait and see how everything transpires with that. But right now, I'm willing to say I think Verrata's got a lot of bright years ahead of him, hopefully in Washington. But if he can just really figure out the whole consistency part of his game and figure out how to contribute in other ways where it's not always him having to be on the score sheet in terms of scoring goals or picking up assists, that can go a long way to helping this Capitals team add another star to their ranks of what is already a veteran core, but have a young star in behind those guys ready to take the mantle. And that's pretty much all I got to say on the Washington Capitals. So with that, I think we can move right along to our last topic of the day, dealing with the NFL. So I guess to get into our last topic of the day, it has to do with the NFL and specifically the Washington football team and things going on basically this off season. And really, it seems like the theme of this off season really seems to be about the quarterback position. You've got things going on with Deshaun Watson and where trade stops he's going to go, and if the Texans are even going to trade this guy at this point. Is Dak Prescott going to get his new deal, and how much of that quote-unquote new money is he going to end up getting from the Cowboys to stick around? And then now you got Russell Wilson, who has kind of been thrown into the ring. Even though he says he certainly wants to stay with the Seahawks, you still have his representatives going out there and reaching out to see what other teams are interested. We've heard teams, especially with Russell Wilson, like Saints. We got the Bears. We've even got the Las Vegas Raiders who are in on him, as well as guys like Deshaun Watson, who are drawing interest from similar teams, but also teams like the Jets, the Dolphins, the Panthers as well, who I think are teams that certainly make sense from my specific standpoint of needing a quarterback to really take that next step and become true contenders at the NFL level. And Deshaun Watson is certainly a quarterback that can become that. But with all this quarterback movement, this kind of takes me back to the whole idea of what's Washington going to continue to do at the quarterback position. I mean, again, Washington, by hook or by crook, was 7-9 last year, won the NFC East, and yet we don't really know what they're going to do at the quarterback spot. Because right now, still, the only quarterback they currently have signed on to the roster going into the next season is Taylor Heineke. So are the rumors about them possibly being interested in guys like Cam Newton or Ryan Fitzpatrick, are those going to grow legs and start walking? Are we going to see them, again, reach out to Kyle Allen and eventually bring him back on board, which I think everyone kind of assumed, even though he broke his leg in the middle of the season. We just kind of assumed he was going to be back, but we still haven't heard anything about bringing him back yet. Are they just waiting to hear back in terms of the medical front before they decide to commit to him? I mean, there's still a lot of questions for a team that just had a making the playoffs type of season as Washington did. I mean, it's pretty weird, but I guess it kind of suits the Washington football team pretty well that they go in with, it feels like, just as many questions at the most important position in this league as they have answers at other spots on their roster. But I think the good thing for DC is that right now there's a lot of quarterbacks coming out in this draft. Now, can I necessarily say I've been able to watch every single quarterback in this draft? No, but if they like a guy and they want to take him, that's great. If they don't and they want to go out and get a veteran and wait a little longer, will I be thrilled with that idea? Not necessarily, because I still am on the whole game plan of drafting a guy and developing a guy and sort of getting our guy that grows through our system that we have success with going forward. But we got to trust in Ron Rivera. He's gotten us this far already, and I think ahead of schedule in terms of being able to win this division. So we'll have to see where he takes us, but that's where I kind of stand on the quarterback situation, especially when it pertains to Washington. Now, let's talk about Brandon Scherff. That's the other big thing I really want to talk about. And it's dealing with his contract situation. Obviously, I've talked to certain people in my family and friends as well, and the main thing I've kind of told them is that from what we've seen and what I've been able to hear and read from a lot of these different sources, that they gave him the franchise tag for $50 million this past year, and all they really could had to do last year was just extend him. You could have been paying him $15 million per already. Now you go into an off season where now he's got a heck of a lot of leverage, because now he's firmly established himself as one of the best guards in the NFL, and last year was ranked the fourth best guard in the league. Made a first-team All-Pro. And again, you're talking about a guy who's a warrior, who's played through injuries, just like we've seen with certain players on this team in the past, i.e. Trent Williams. He's a team leader, and I think he's really much more of a necessary franchise cornerstone than people want to give him credit for. Really, since he's been here in Washington, they've had some of their more successful seasons since he's gotten here, whether you say he's been a direct microcosm of that or not, but certainly the team's been a lot better, especially offensive line play has been a lot better since he's become a full-time starter. So I don't think we can overlook that in the slightest. I think he's a guy you ultimately have to pay. They have to find a way to keep him in Washington. Now, the last thing I really want to get into today has to deal with the whole idea of the Lamar Jackson situation. I keep hearing this whole thing tossed around, whether it's on the national airwaves or just local media, or even just people online that like to talk about the Ravens and the whole discussion of Lamar and this number one receiver aspect. Does he need a number one receiver, and how much would a number one receiver actually benefit Lamar, and how much would he benefit said receiver? Now, the main thing I want to talk about in this standpoint is that how should the Ravens specifically go about choosing who they would want to make the quote unquote number one receiver for Lamar Jackson to help this offense really push forward and become more dynamic in the passing game overall. And I kind of have some yes and no's written down in terms of what I want to see who I would want to see them go after in terms of free agency or trade, and guys I would want to see them probably stay away from for some specific reasons, or reasons I should say specific to those particular players. Now in the no list, it's pretty short, but I just have it written down to these three guys, and they're probably the three biggest name players on the market. These being Odell Beckham Jr., my apologies, who is still currently a part of the Cleveland Browns, but there's been a lot of talk about him possibly getting traded this offseason. You have Antonio Brown, who just won a Super Bowl with the Tampa Bay Bucks, the embattled receiver, and he's a free agent, so do they go after him? I say no. Then Deshaun Jackson's another guy where I think they should stay away from. And I say stay away from these guys not to disrespect them in any way, because all three are great players that I think can come in and make immediate impact and be sort of a number one guy in a receiving core for the Ravens that really needs it. But at the end of the day, I mean, Deshaun Jackson, he's always dealt with a lot of injuries, and we saw it again last year. He's just not a guy you can count on. Antonio Brown, I'm not even going to get into all the off-field stuff and things of that nature. I just don't think that's a guy you necessarily want to bring into your locker room, even if you may feel like your locker room's strong enough to handle him. And then OBJ, kind of the same way, not to the same extent, but I feel like it's such an alpha male that is a guy that can maybe just because of his presence, can be a bit of a demanding force that I don't necessarily think, I'm not going to say Lamar can handle, but I don't think the Ravens should necessarily be looking into. The type of guy that I have on my yes list that I think the Ravens should go after should be guys like Chris Godwin, Kenny Golladay, Allen Robinson, Corey Davis of the Titans. You got Marvin Jones of the Lions, who was teammates with Kenny Golladay on the line. And then Tyrell Williams, who didn't even play last year, but he's been a very productive receiver in this league for both the San Diego, now LA Chargers, and the now Las Vegas Raiders. And when I look at all those guys I just named, really the main things that come down to it for me is they're big body receivers that are great and have great 50-50 ball ability. And they're also the type of guy that can be safety blankets on the outside. So now it's not just Lamar having his safety blanket at tight end with a guy like Mark Andrews. Now he's got a big body receiver on the outside where when he needs to look to a guy to get a key first down, kind of like what we saw with Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs. Now, Stephon Diggs I wouldn't say is the biggest receiver in the world, but you see the transformation that Josh Allen made and the steps he took forward last year, knowing he had a guy that at any particular moment, if he needs to make a big throw, he's going to that guy. He knows 90% of the time at the bare minimum that guy's going to make the play. And I think Lamar needs that same type of guy as well. I mean, even look at Patrick Mahomes, despite what we saw from him in the Super Bowl. I mean, he's got Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill is a speed burner, Mecole Hardman, another guy with speed. I mean, he's got weapons all around him. I mean, I'm not trying to disrespect that the Ravens don't have talented players on offense, but I think if they can get a true, and I mean major big body receiver, possession receiver, but also a guy that can make big plays down the field for a guy like Lamar Jackson, I think you're going to finally see Lamar really take off. And he might even put up better passing numbers than we saw in his MVP season. I mean, I truly believe that, because I'm not going to be one of these guys that's going to question his ability to throw. But he's already shown us that since he came into the league, that this guy can throw the football at a high level. So, I mean, does Lamar need a number one receiver? I think yes. How the Ravens go about acquiring him? You could either do it through trade. I think free agency is more the reliable option. Although, again, I'm not too certain about their cap situation, although I know they're kind of tight against the cap already. And they got to pay Lamar down the road in the coming year or so. So if you can get one of these receivers that I just named, like a Godwin or a Galladay, that's going to cost you some money. So I think if they can go after guys, say, like Marvin Jones or a Tyrell Williams, where they're probably going to be, I think, on the back half of the market, they're still going to cost a nice little chunk of change, but they're certainly not going to be the big money guys that are going to make big paydays like Godwin and Galladay. I think that's the type of guy you can get Lamar, and he can really make things work, because I think Lamar is a dynamic quarterback, as not only a runner, but as a passer, and needs to start getting credit for that. And that's pretty much all I have to say on that matter and on the NFL overall. So I just want to say thank you all for listening, and I hope all the things discussed in this first installment generate some good sports talk at home or among your friends. Be sure to be on the lookout on social media, i.e. Facebook and Twitter, for announcements about the next installment of the Runaround series. And feel free to start sending in comments and suggestions for topics under the social media post this piece will be attached to, or in the comments section on the corresponding YouTube post as well. Everyone have a great day, and there will be plenty more unheralded content to come.